Hello, and thank you so much for joining me today for another thought from the Bible. I just love this book so much. I love how you can pick it up and read a verse that you've read for the first time or the 1000th time, and God can still speak so clearly through it. Recently, I've been reading through the book of Romans in my daily Bible reading plan, and that is a meaty book, I can tell you. There are so many good verses in there, and some of them we know so well. Verses like Romans chapter 12 and verse 2 that says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will." Now, I don't know about you, but I find it very easy to get a little bit too caught up in wondering what God's will for my life is. Even this week, I found myself questioning again what God's will is for me here in this beautiful country of Liberia. What should I be doing? Am I in the right place? Where should I be going? Am I hearing from God correctly? We want to know the answers to those questions, right? And that comes from a place of good intention. We want to be in the place of God's will. We want to be following his plan for our lives. We don't want to be in the wrong place. That's a good intention. But the problem is, we tend to look at this the wrong way around. You know, we like the second part of that verse, right? Being able to test and approve what God's will for us is. But it's a little bit easy sometimes to ignore the first part. That little word, then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is. That means that part of the verse only follows after we've done the first part. If we want to know God's will, if we want, as the New Living Translation of that verse puts it, to learn to know God's will for us, which is good and pleasing and perfect, then we first need to ensure that we are not conforming to the pattern of this world, but instead are being transformed by the renewing of our minds. We need to make sure that we are not copying the behavior and customs of this world, but letting God transform us into new people by changing the way that we think. And I find the wording that's used here really interesting because it suggests an ongoing process. It's a process of transformation. It's a process of changing our minds. This isn't something where you just click your fingers and suddenly it's done. It's something that we need to do every single day. Let our minds be transformed and renewed. And so often I think that we have this idea that if we just knew God's will for our lives, absolutely everything else would fall into place. Our minds would of course be transformed to fit in with the will of God once we know what it is we're supposed to be doing. We kind of want one of those burning bush moments where we hear the audible voice of God saying, "This is what I have for your life. This is what I want you to be doing." We want to see it written in the skies. But in reality, it's only as we allow God to adjust the way we think, to allow transformation to enter into our minds and into our hearts, that we will discover that good and pleasing plan that he has for us. We need to shift our focus away from am I doing the right thing here? Am I in the right place here? And instead onto, am I giving enough time and space to get to know God, to turn away from the things of this world, to allow him to transform my mind as I dwell on his goodness and his majesty and his mercy. It's all well and good having one of those burning bush kind of moments, and sometimes that is the way God works. Sometimes there is a sudden revelation and we know without a shadow of a doubt what we should be doing. But if we're not already transformed, if our minds haven't already been renewed, I wonder if we'll really be able to follow that command anyway. Or would it be all too easy to make some kind of an excuse? Well, I'm not sure I really saw that bush on fire. I think it might have been my imagination. That's not really something that happens. I don't think that was really God speaking to me. It's all too easy to make excuses. And it's not a bad thing to want to do what God wants us to do. That is a good thing. That's a good intention, but we do get it so back to front sometimes. We can be more focused on knowing God's will for our lives than on knowing God Himself. Knowing what God wants us to do comes from a place of relationship with Him. It comes out of choosing to stand for something different. It comes out of letting God transform us daily, of allowing Him to change the way that we think. It comes out of being exposed every single day to an all-consuming love that loved us while we were still sinners, and being able to turn that love outwards onto the sometimes unlovable people that we may meet. Our minds are incredibly powerful things, and it is all too easy to let them run away into thought patterns that are unhelpful, that can even stop us hearing anything from God. Those thought patterns can stop us getting to grips with what His will for our lives actually is. Because we can be persuaded, for example, never to step out in faith because we have told ourselves too often, you can't do this. Who do you think you are to even try and do this? This is impossible. Now, I wonder if you're truly honest with yourself, if you really, really thought about it, if you made a catalogue of your thoughts throughout the day, what would most of them be filled with? Are they consumed with whatever is true and lovely and admirable and noble and right and excellent and praiseworthy? Or are they dominated by the pattern of this world? By worry, by fear, by greed, or pride, or envy, or sin, or whatever it may be that dominates your thoughts that is not of God? The great news today is that it is never, ever too late to change those thought patterns. It may not be easy, but you can start right now. Whenever those negative thoughts creep into your head, before they can get a foothold in your mind, you can replace them with worship. You can replace them with adoration for our great God. You can replace them with the beauty and the wonder of creation. You can allow God to transform you by changing the way that you think, and you can start that process right now. Thank you so much for joining me for that thought from the Bible today. I hope that was an encouragement for you, and I will be back on Wednesday next week with another video, so I will see you then.